Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurunritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Adinamrita Bujo Kanadavarato Sanketanaye Pitaro Kamalaya Tasum Vishwambaro Dvijabaro Yugaramaparo Chaitanya Nityananda Sahodito Vandeham Shri Ramakrishna Bhavaya Charanasako Sukaranandaro Sundaro Suvarapriyo Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Goresha Gopika Kanda Radha Kanda Namaste Tata Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishwanu Sudevi Pranami Harive Jai Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki Jai. Continuing our discussion of Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila. We're in chapter 14, where Krishna's Kumar Lila is, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Kumar Lila is being described, and it's not too much of a mistake there, because Krishna and Lila they're one and different at the same time, and this, of course, what comes out in these in this chapter, many parallels, that is, between Lila of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and that of Sri Krishna. So we heard, what did we hear? About the auspicious bodily characteristics.
He was lying on his back with his feet up.
Excuse me. Yes. Of Krishna, of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and we discussed how they were comparable to those found in the child of Krishna, as Nanda Maharaj testified, 32 different auspicious symptoms, and particularly the markings on his feet were the subject noticed by his parents in terms of footprints, and then on the feet themselves, and how they reasoned about that. We discussed at some length. So today, continuing the text, Tabe Kotta Dine Prabhu Janu Chankramana Nan Chamatkar Tata Korila Darshan. So after some days, then Prabhu began to crawl on his knees and caused various wonderful things to be seen. So these are still, again, because of all the Kumar Lila, Bali Lila. So he's now from crawling. I don't know how they saw his footprints before he crawled, but some overlapping here in the discussion. But again, as we've heard before, Krishnadas Kaviraj Swami, when speaking about his book and how he came to write it, in the 8th chapter of this Adi Lila, referred repeatedly to Vrindavan Das Thakur, whose Chaitanya Bhagavat was the standard book of the time for relishing the the Leelas of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Vrindavan and particular, and thus Krishnadas was asked to write in some detail about the later pastimes, which he was perhaps more acquainted with, being a disciple of Raghunath Das Goswami, as he says towards the end of his book, Chaitanya Charitamrita. And Raghunath Das, of course, was in Puri and was under the direct Siksha of Swarup Damodar. And this is in the presence of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Swarup's diary, was a good part of what Krishnadas's work is drawn from, the narrative. So here, then, Prabhupada, in places like this, he comments from sections of Chaitanya Bhagavat. Here he mentions that amongst the various pastimes that are described here in kind of a general way, he did wonderful things, crawling around, caused wonderful things to happen. One that Prabhupada points out that, again, this is the beauty of the Chaitanya Bhagavat. Chaitanya Charitamrita is beautiful for its theology and very concise presentation of who Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is from the perspective of Rupa Goswami, who is particularly empowered to teach about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's descent, and again it centers on the Madhya Lila pastimes, which are the teaching pastimes, which teach us how to enter into these pastimes, which is the speciality of Chaitanya Bhagavat, where they're elaborated upon in greater detail, more relish there in terms of the Navadvip pastimes details. One of them here, again, Prabhupada refers to with regard to Krishna's or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's crawling as a child, is that he crawled up and snuggled up with a big cobra, and the cobra kind of went back in his coils, and his head went up, and there was the child lying on the coils, to the concern of everyone. But there's an obvious significance to this, given that this is the typical depiction of Vishnu and Anantasesh, Krishna and Balaram also. So Balaram's already here, although he comes later. And of course, the divinity of the child is the main thing that's to be drawn from this. He plays on the support of the world, something like that, supported by himself in one form, and on that he plays, and without fear. Krandaner chale bolila harinam nari shab hari bole hasibodham. So here says that the ladies nari shab hari bole, they used to chant the holy name of Hari whenever the child cried, and through this medium they sought to pacify him and make him stop crying. This was their technique. Here we're reminded of the fact that many of the names that you often refer to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Gauri, Sachinandan, Gauranga, these come from the Vatsali Bhaktas, who play a principal role here in the earlier pastime. This Gauranga Leela, this Kumar Leela, is very special with regard to Vatsali Rasa, Krishna. Of course, in Gaur Leela, everyone's a das of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but his mother still is a Vatsali. Bhakta and his father, and so on and so forth. These are the paradigmatic figures in Krishna Lila, Nanda Yashoda, for example, Rohini, or in the Gaur Lila, Sachi, Nanda Maharaj. And Ilambar Chakrabarti was mentioned earlier, the grandfather of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the astrologer who named him Vishwambar and so forth, and who identified the 32 symptoms and said, he's extraordinary. I see these symptoms in him and so forth. Taking kind of a Gargacharya role there. He may be identified with Garga Muni. I recall, but I think it's probably the case. Who was the name-giving priest and the astrologer for Krishna. So here the ladies, Vatsalya Bhaktas, led, I suppose we could say, by Sita Thakurani, who named it Nimai, name that stuck throughout. All these names are very popular names. Gaurari, Gauranga, Nimai, and so forth. They come from this sector, saturated with the Vatsalya love. And here it's mentioned that by chanting the holy name, it caused him to stop crying. After some days, he began to move his legs and walk. He mixed with other children and exhibited various sports. Etadin, Sachi Kai Sandesh Aniya, Bata Bhari, Dio Moila, Khao Tha Basiya. One day, Etdin Sachi Kai Sandesh Aniya. One day the Lord was enjoying various sports and with his friends, and Sachi brought some fused rice, some sandesh, and asked the child to sit down and eat some refreshments. Etto bole gela Sachi grihe karma korite lokana logila shishu mritika koite. But when she returned, to her household duties, the child, hiding from his mother, began to eat dirt. Seeing this, Mother Sachi hastily returned, exclaiming, "What is this? What is this?" She snatched the dirt from his hands and inquired why he was eating it. Crying, the child inquired from his mother, "Why are you angry? You've only given me dirt to eat. What is my fault?" Fused rice, sandesh, and anything edible is all but a transformation of dirt. This is dirt, that is dirt. Please consider, what is the difference between them? This body is a transformation of dirt, and edibles are also a transformation of dirt. Please reflect on this. You are blaming me without consideration. What can I say? Antare Vishmita Sachi Mulilatahare Mati Kaite Gyanyo Ke Shikailatore. Full of astonishment that he was speaking Gyan Yoga, Prabhupada translates it as Mayavad philosophy, not necessarily, but that he takes every opportunity and creates opportunities to rail against the Mayavad. Mother Sachi replied, "Who has taught you these philosophical ideas and that justify eating dirt?" Replying to the Mayavad idea of the child philosopher, Mother Sachi said, "My dear boy, if we eat earth transformed into grains, our body is nourished and it becomes strong. But if we eat dirt in its crude state, the body becomes diseased instead of nourished. And thus it is destroyed. In a water pot, which is a transformation of dirt, I can bring water very easily. If I poured the water in a lump of dirt, however, would so with the water and my labor would be useless." The Lord replied to his mother, "Why did you conceal this insight by not teaching me this practical philosophy from the very beginning. Now I can understand this philosophy, and I will not eat dirt again. Whenever I'm hungry, I shall suck your breasts and drink your breast milk. After saying this, the Lord, smiling slightly, climbed on the lap of his mother and began to nurse. Thus, e mate nam jali aishvarya dekhaya valya bhava prakatiya paschatupaya. Thus, under various excuses, the Lord exhibited his opulences as much as possible in his childhood, and later, after exhibiting such opulences, he hid himself. So this is a nice story. It's a story that seems to have its roots in the Chaitanya Bhagavat and earlier texts, but it's told differently here in Chaitanya Charitamrita than it is in Chaitanya Bhagavat, in the work of Kavi, in the work of Murari Gupta. And we can only assume that it's a retelling of the story slightly differently, or it's an entirely different Leela, but the latter seems unlikely. Although the Leelas are unlimited, and Krishnadas does say that he's only going to speak in any detail on those that are not mentioned by Vrindavan Das. So perhaps it's a separate one, but the one that seems to correspond to some extent is the occasion on which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as a child, was stopped by his father, Jagannath Mishra, from pursuing any further in education. He's just a child, and he had an appetite for learning. This is before this is like learning at home or something. And he stopped educating him in any way. And his reason for this was because he was concerned that this boy's smart and he has an appetite for learning. So if I teach him, he'll end up doing what his brother did, Vishvarup. And so it'd be a problem. So it said that he stopped education, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't like this. So he became more rebellious, and he had more time on his hands to do so. So as a child with friends, they would create lots of mischief. They would plan out in the daytime how to go and put a cloth, two of them, one like this, over their heads, look like a bull, and go in the night and crush the crops of people, and then come back in the morning. What happened? This kind of thing. It said Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would lock the doors of people from the outside, so they couldn't get out of their houses. And then they would complain. So take much pleasure in that childishness. These things might be questioned. How could God do? But there's a very good explanation for that. With regard to the pastime in particular, that this seems to have some correspondence with when he was stopped from getting his education. Amongst his mischievous things, one of the things that he did was went and sat on a pile of clay pots that had been used for cooking food, preparing prasad for the deity. So they were charred. So when they would cook with clay pots, maybe in baking and whatnot, and they were full of soot and what, so they were thrown in a place, and that was a contaminated place. It was thought not to go to. And there he was sitting there, and Mother Sachi came upon him, and the Golden Lord had turned blackish from the soot on the pots. Must have looked just like someone we're familiar with, just like Shyam Sundar Krishna and childhood Krishna. And so she was filled with, here the word is used here, Antari Vishmita Sachi Bolilo Tahare, Vishmaya or Bhuta, wonder, astonishment, one of the secondary rasas, in the context of her Vatsalya. what are you doing here? You're sitting in a dirty place and you're covered with the soot and so forth. And this pastime and the one here, they're either one or somewhat different. They, of course, obviously they correspond with Krishna's pastime in Vrindavan in the 8th chapter of the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, where Krishna has been accused by his friends, including Balaram, of having eaten dirt. And we'll see if we discuss this, the philosophical lesson drawn from both of these leelas comes out the same. So, both in the eating of the dirt here and the eating of the dirt there, and to some extent also the sitting amongst the dirty things and being covered with soot and so forth. And I should play that out. Mother Sati is astonished and she complains, and in the different texts explain in different ways, some of which say he became angry at her for being angry at him and threw a clay pot at her and she passed out. And the neighbors revived her and said, bring some coconuts, and Chaitanya manifests 2 white coconuts out of nowhere, and she drank them and became cured. And then he snuggled with her, was cuddled by her, and the soot rubbed off on her, they bathed and so forth, and everything was resolved. The miraculous manifestation of the coconuts put everybody in a different space for a moment, and everything was forgotten, and so forth. Of course, at that time, he argued philosophically, and that's kind of the comparison here, and more or less he spoke about the non-duality from a spiritual perspective, the basic non-duality of a spiritual perspective. Vrindavan Das compares it to his talks to that of Dattatreya, a partial incarnation of Krishna, maybe Shaktivesh, I don't recall, but he had this kind of perspective, kind of like Jagbar, also maybe a little more familiar with him in the Bhagavatam. Didn't see any difference between anything, as the Gita says, in a number of places. One sees a lump of dirt and gold as the same. What's the other one?
Dog and dog eater.
Yeah, in Sanskrit.
Oh.
Pandita Samadarshina, Hasti, sees the elephant, the dog, the Brahman, as equal. So it's equal vision. Samadarshina. Once Prabhupada was asked by an Indian fellow in Mayapur, are you Samadarshina? Prabhupada said, I may be, I may not be. I simply try to serve my guru. That is my qualification. So it is an underlying aspect of our philosophy, obviously, that good and bad, hot and cold, and these are dualities that arise in the mind. But beyond that, within, it gets complicated, within the context of the non-dual reality, that means everything is Krishna, so there's only one, there is differentiation as well. In Vrindavan Das's narrative, he doesn't go into that, but just has Chaitanya Mahaprabhu enlightening his mother, or not enlightening, it's not something she hadn't heard before, but to hear it coming from her son was very astonishing. And he's speaking about non-duality, and this is this thing that the rishis talk about, and sometimes we get it, and we hear it and we believe it, but we're absorbed in the dualities of everyday life and so forth, such as our plight. And here my son, this is a child that's speaking, this is very astonishing. Maybe he's a great mystic, but then why is he throwing a pot at me? Can't be, something like that. So that idea is quickly dismissed. So, as I say here, the story is slightly different. He's eating dirt, and it's more of a direct parallel with the story in Krishna Lila. But he's speaking philosophically also here, only to be replied to by his mother with a superior philosophy. Here he seems to be saying all things are one, as he does in the cooking pot lila. So what's the difference? I'm sitting on the pots. You say they're impure, but what's the difference between a pure and impure place? This all in the mind. He also kind of goes on to say, wherever I sit must be pure, and he manifests the law of Bhagwan. And he also makes the point there in that well, these pots have been used to cook for Vishnu, so even though they're dirty, they must be pure. So a little Vaishnavism there as well. But of course, the Advaita Tattva, the Bhagavatam, the underlying philosophy of Gaudiya Vaishnavism is one of non-duality. We call it a Chinti Veda Veda. So again, everything is only Krishna. Sri Maharaj once put it like this, the famous aphorism, Sarvam Kalo Idam Brahma. Everything is Brahman. He said, that's right. There's Brahman and they're all things, and they're one. There's nothing else. It doesn't say there's nothing else. It says everything is Brahman. It's Brahman. So there are all types of things. There's us, in other words, and there's matter, and it's all Brahman. Because it's all coming from him. It's his different Shaktis and so forth. I thought it was a nice explanation of a verse that's often, or an aphorism often invoked by the Mayavadis. Everything is Brahman, Sarvam Kaloidam Brahman. But their understanding of it is different. So here in this Leela, and in the Krishna Leela, where Krishna's eating dirt, this Chinti Veda Veda is what's being taught philosophically in the context of attracting us, showering us, the readers of the Bhagavatam, with Vatsalya Bhava. This is kind of I've said that there are certain chapters, primarily the Vatsalya, the Damara Leela, that's really centered on Vatsalya Rasa. This is leading up to that. And it's a very, very powerful chapter. In fact, in this chapter, now that I think about it, of the 8th chapter of Bhagavatam and 10th canto, and in relation to this Leela, the verse that I believe is the concluding verse of the story of Krishna's eating dirt is what one that Vishwanath Chakravarti refers to as the Paribhas Sutra of the Bhagavatam, a verse by which everything will be understood. And the Leela is speaking, of course, about the Chinti Veda Veda. How so? Well, we have to get to that, but as it is here, it's been explained to some extent just to what Sachi has said. Everything may be one, but there's difference at the same time. Yes, earth and dirt and food are, one is a transformation of the other, but each is distinct at the same time, and your philosophy has no practical application. It's impractical. So it has no standing. But in Krishna Leela, similar idea comes out, and in a very extraordinary way, of course, when he eats the dirt and Mother Yasoda finds out about it, not only from his friends who might be reporting falsely just to get his mother to chastise him and then take pleasure in that, as children may do, but the veracity of the reports in Mother Yasoda's mind are derived from the fact that Balaram is saying the same thing. This drove a little bit of a wedge between Krishna and Balaram. This Vatsalya is not compatible with the Sakya. They tend to distance one another. There's a little Vatsalya there in the mixture in the Sakya of Balaram, and it manifests as he's telling the truth here and reporting on him, and that creates some distance. It comes up later. Krishna reflects on it and reminds him of such. But the veracity of it then is supported by his testimony. He's been appointed like this, the elder brother, to watch out for him, report on him and so forth. So he's a good boy, comparatively. Mischievous in his own right, but not the same as Krishna. So he reports, and Mother Yashoda takes it seriously and says, if Balaram's saying it, it must be true. And she's astonished. So same. She experiences the same adbhuta, amazement, wonder. How is this possible that he could be eating dirt? I mean, she's thinking, I'm his mother. I feed him. I nurse him. We're the king and queen of the cowherds. We've got an abundance of food, and he's eating dirt. What are we doing wrong? Why is he doing that? Mm-hmm. She's perplexed. Where have we gone wrong? Or what's wrong with him? Why would he do that? Maybe he's got some, deranged brain or something. He would act like this. So she's full of concern. Her wonder is occurring in the context of her Vatsalya, and her challenging him, and her being prepared to, she's really kind of starting to chastise him, is all arising out of the well of her Vatsalya. This is not, I think we ended our discussion, or close to it the other night, by saying that Krishna likes the chastisement of his mother in Vatsalya Rasa. He likes to hear that more than the recitation of the Vedas by the Brahmins. That's sweeter and more charming to him, and so forth. So these types of things here, Krishna's going to lie, Mother Yashoda is going to be angry at him, chastise him. These things might seem inappropriate, but they're natural. Again, we to understand these things from a rasic point of view. We can often just go to our human experience. We're made in the likeness, it says. So young children, in the face of being punished, may not tell the truth. They haven't learned to tell the truth yet. And the truth hurts, but it's good for you. Something like that. So she asks him, so why have you eaten dirt? He says, I haven't eaten dirt. So he's lying. The absolute truth is supposed to be truthful. Truthfulness is a very highly lauded quality. It's said to be synonymous with being a devotee. Satam is the word used more than once in the Bhagavatam to describe the devotees, thoroughly honest. But here, their God is being dishonest. He's lying, because he had eaten the dirt. But here, his lying is arising out of Vatsalya Rasa, out of his affection for his mother and the affectionate dealings, human-like dealings of Vatsalya Rasa. So his lying becomes much more beautiful and charming and more virtuous of a quality from a spiritual perspective than his truthfulness, overriding all of his qualities. We talked a little bit about the other night, his 64 qualities in relation to the various body characteristics that are auspicious in Krishna's body, which are one of his qualities. We talked about them in terms of their being both seen as Udipana Vibhavs and Alambana Vibhav, depending how you look at them. Who's the one?
His lying.
His lying is actually
Right, amongst the qualities of Krishna, his affection for his devotees, his affectionate dealing with his devotees is the supreme quality. And so, in the context of that, for example, he's truthful, Krishna, but out of love for his devotees, and he may be untruthful out of affection for his devotees. He may tell an untruth. And the superior quality overrides, and he's super. In other words, to be affectionate as he is towards his devotees, it was most makes him worshipable more than his truthfulness. This comes up in the Vedanta Sutra, where the question is God partial? We see that some people are born, as they say, with a silver spoon in their mouth, and other people are born poor. It would seem that God is partial and unfair. Or what? The implication of that is, so why should I worship him? He's unfair. He's not all good. And of course, the sutras reply, no, that's not the case. This difference, inequality, is a result of karma. The sutras, of course, say, well, what happened at the beginning when karma began then? It must have started out unevenly. And the sutras say, no, there is no beginning to karma. End of that section. And the next section begins, which says, however, we do see partiality in God in relation to his devotees. He defers to bhakti. Indeed, he's really kind of defined by bhakti in terms of his different appearances. He appears in correspondence to the bhakti in the heart of his devotees. It's his own Swarup Shakti. It's inseparable from him, but it appears in his devotees, and it's manifest as devotees in a practical sense, apparently separate from him. And from those paradigmatic figures of Vatsalya Ras, Sakya Ras, Madhurya Ras, through the Parampara and Sadhusanga, of course, it comes to us. And then Krishna enters into a relationship with us. He stays within, as far as the influence of Shakti, is the influence of the Swarup Shakti. He never comes under the influence of the Maya Shakti, and he's not influenced by the Jiva Shakti. He knows their plight, and maybe indirectly a little influenced by that, but he's really wrapped up under the influence of his Swarup Shakti. He's really kind of creating all his pastimes. He has a desire. Swarup Shakti is manifesting that. Swarup Shakti is something like the modes of nature. The modes of nature are there, and there's all types of forms inside of them that could possibly come out, right? And a different combination. Everything's just a combination of the modes. So within the Swarup Shakti, there's possibilities. The difference, of course, is that the forms that manifest and the particulars that manifest out of the gunas and the basic ingredients of material nature are such that they don't endure. But we say that the Swarup of the Jiva is eternal. We were talking about this maybe the other night. The Swarup of the Jiva is eternal. And how do we say it? Because we say the bhava that it is constituted of is eternal. So Sakya Rasa is eternal. The Vatsalya Rasa is eternal. What is the ashraya of that? And Nanda, Yashoda, Subal, Sridham, Madhurya Rasa, Lalita, Vishaka. They're the ashraya, the shelter of that, the personification of that. It's there, eternally existing. But then someone said, well, that's fine. It comes to me, that influence, but my particular Swarup, made of, if you will, or constituted of Sakya Rasa or Madhurya Rasa, is not eternal. Because it wasn't there before, even though the ingredients are there. So we say it's there in potential. And if it's like a fire, if you have a fire and you take an iron rod compared to the Tatastha Shakti and you stick it in the fire, after, in due course of time, which was the question the other night, in due course of time, that iron rod becomes, for all intents and purposes, fire. So the Jiva Shakti, when it is consumed by the fire of Bhakti, the Swarup Shakti, it develops the capacity to function in the Lila as the lover of Krishna. It has the potential to do so. And if you were to pull that iron from the fire and touch someone, they wouldn't say they got touched by iron, they say they got touched by fire. and you may even pull it from the fire, and it will have a flame around it, a flame body. So where does that flame body come from? That flame was in the fire. Now it's manifesting in a way that it only does because of the conjunction between the iron and the fire, between the Tatastha Shakti and the Jiva Shakti. But it's there. It's just showing a different shape than it does as the fire itself. So this is the kind of like the form. Love has a shape. It takes a shape. So the Swarup Shakti is facilitating the love in such a way that it manifests form, personality, and so forth. We can participate in the Leela. So, at any rate, the point of the sutras is that the affection of Bhagavan for his devotees, he's under the influence of prema. He's conquered by prema. This is his quality, or the quality, I should say, of bhakti, that has the power. Krishna's Krishna, all attractive, except for the fact that he's attracted by bhakti. We've got a circle going on here. Like I said, where does Krishna come from? It comes from Radha. Where's Radha come? It comes from Krishna. So this is the Achinta Veda Veda, the one difference between the Swarup Shakti and Shaktiman. So Krishna's the partiality of Krishna towards his devotees, you can sometimes explain it away by saying, well, it depends how people approach him. He reciprocates accordingly, therefore he's impartial. But it's up to you how you approach him. But he's actually, it's true, but the way in which he becomes partial towards his devotees is really defines him. That's what he's about. He's completely under their control. He's completely overwhelmed by bhakti. He cannot move outside of the circle of his devotees' concern, influence. And because of his affection for his devotees, this partiality towards his devotees, the sutra says, this is his best quality. That's what makes him, not his truthfulness, or other such qualities, as noble as they are and as much as they're part of bhakti, but his affection for his devotees was what makes him attracted to them. That he'll even lie for them. We're going for him. You said, I don't want to worship him. He's not fair. Right? He created the world in differently. Some people are rich, some people are poor. What kind of God is that? Well, if you play this out over the two Adhikarans in the sutra, it ends up in the following Adhikaran that you're right, he is partial, but in another way, and this is what makes him all worshipable, all desirable, all attractive. It's a very beautiful way it's been done, explained in Govinda Bhashya by Baladev Vidyabhushan. So his partiality towards his devotees is not his fault, it's his greatest quality. And sometimes, as a result of his partiality towards his devotees, then other qualities that he's known for, like being truthful, maybe overridden by his Bhakta Vatsalya, and that's good. So this is bhakti is Gyan is about impartiality, and bhakti is about partiality. After having risen beyond material partiality, where the Gyanis stop, then we have a different kind of partiality in relation to Bhagavan, which has to be there in order for there to be a variegated spiritual world. For there to be Ram Bhakti, for there to be Krishna Bhakti, different kinds of Krishna Bhakti, Narayan Bhakti, and each Bhakti feeling complete and perfect with their Bhakti, even while there's a gradation. The gradation is really, actually the gradation of Bhakti is thought to be a secondary thing. The subjective reality is what's really primary. The experience of each devotee that causes them to feel that their bhakti is superior. And they all argue objectively for the superiority of their own. So Krishna, anyway, in the Leela, Krishna lies. It's a problem because along with lying, he's a powerful character. So he says, "I didn't eat dirt. Oh, look in my mouth and see for yourself." Now she could just say, "Okay, I'm not gonna, look in your mouth," but she's suspicious because Balaram said he ate the dirt, and so she's going to look in his mouth. But there's a problem that's created now because obviously he doesn't want to be chastised by her in the context of the Vatsalya rapport, which is very charming, and so he lies, and then he says, "See for yourself." And obviously, when he opens his mouth, dirt's going to be found there, and he's going to be chastised. So what to do? He is overwhelmed by the Vatsalya prem, and so he says that, and he's kind of ignorant of the fact that he's going to be found out. It is childhoodishness, right? So he's made a problem for himself now. But in all of this, in the background of the sweetness of the Braj Leela or Gaur Leela, this Madhurya, the sweetness of Vatsalya here, there's always Aishvarya. It's always in the background, right? He's always God. He has Aishvarya Gyan or power of Aishvarya, of godliness. And so this, just as the Swarup Shakti is always trying to serve Krishna. He's such a sankalpa, so whatever desire he has, the Swarup Shakti is there to manifest it, to make it possible. Someone wants to serve him, having had their heart purified through bhakti, and by satsanga developing a sentiment similar to that, those bhaktas, or that lineage, and starts to manifest in them, and then in the sprout, the ankur of that bhav, in the cultivation of that devotee starts to have real spiritual desires, which then start to define the particulars of the Sarup, that flame body of the iron rod, right? And they're desiring, and it's entirely arising out of the desire to please the senses of Bhagavan in the context of a particular bhava, and so in the particulars, and the Swarup Shakti is manifesting those particulars for the pleasure of Krishna. This is what she's always doing. She's always changing, just like in Vaikuntha, they change forms. Swarup Shakti facilitates. Serve Krishna in this way, Dasiras. I take this shape. I take this shape. They become a pigeon. They become a tree. They become. It happens. And so. So, in the background, orchestrating is this Swarup Shakti, facilitating Krishna, and it works in both ways. You have the Madhurya and the Aishvarya. So the Aishvarya has now a chance to have a role in Krishna Leela. So he gets his place. She gets her place. Krishna's created a problem under the influence of the Madhurya, the sweetness of Vatsalya, where his desire is not to get chastised, but in his boldness, he makes a statement, and his mother doesn't take his bluff. Says, "Put your cards down, open your mouth." So, problem, and so his Aishvarya Gyan comes, knowing his desires. Here's my chance, and manifest the whole universe inside of Krishna. Brahma says, inside his belly. So she's looking in his mouth, and she sees all the way into his belly, and there's the whole universe. And so her Vatsalya prem is now further embellished by Vishmaya, by astonishment, and she forgets about chastising him altogether. So Aishvarya Gyan has played a beautiful part in satisfying the desires of Krishna, and Mother Yasoda is put into a state of bewilderment and confusion. What's going on here? and she sees, the scripture says that she sees everything in there, all the elements and so forth, and in the end, and she sees herself in there, in Vrindavan. The implication is looking into his mouth, and seeing the same thing, and so she's wondering how this is all, what's happening. So what is happening, of course, philosophically, is Achintya Veda Veda is basically what the Leela is saying, and this is the way Mahaprabhu looked at it. He's saying, look at the Leela literally for what's happening and see what it's saying philosophically. I know it doesn't make sense that he could be one and different at the same time, that he could be immanent and fully transcendent at the same time, that he could be in the world and the whole world could be in him. How can you have both? Are you in the world or is the world in you? Which is it? That's what fits in our head. What does the Gita say in the 9th chapter? Where it speaks about Achintya Veda Veda.
Second verse.
Anyway, there he explained, Yogamaishvaryam, my power. See, Pashyam, see, Yogamaishvaram, my Achintya Shakti is what he's saying, my mystic power, by which everything is in me and I'm not in everything, and then I am in everything, and nothing's in me, and so on and so forth. We find it in the Gita there. So this is what the Mahaprabhu's reading of the Leela. The Leela is saying that Krishna is in the world and the world's in Krishna. You can have one or the other, but we have both. And so he's fully immanent and fully transcendent at the same time. So Mother Yasoda, she doesn't start speaking Achintya Veda Veda, but she does hear a Sachi, this Leela. So it's almost as if in Gaur Leela, the same Leela manifests, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wants to see, did my mother learn the philosophy? And of course here she says it, she more or less teaches him Achintya Veda Veda, that everything is one, but there are differences within that unity at the same time. And this is a very practical philosophy. Your Gyan unto itself is not very practical. How will we eat? How will we do it? So Mother Yasoda, back to the Krishna Leela, of course, is seeing all this and thinking, what's happened? How did what? She comes up with different reasons why this could be happening. One of which is maybe my son has mystic powers, which she quickly dismisses because she said, well, how can that be? He's hungry, he's angry, he depends on me. But then she thinks, but that's just what I think. I think he depends on me. That's Maya, and the sages teach that. I think that my son, my husband is Nanda. He's maintaining the family. I'm maintaining my child. It's not a fact. God is maintaining us all. And just my ignorance and samsara, my attachments are making me think like this. And she's becoming philosophical for a moment. Like ordinary people, for a moment, become a little philosophical and have spiritual inclination, and they quickly return back to practical, everyday life. So, of course, what brings her back is Krishna starts to feel she's distancing herself from me. She's becoming philosophical. And so then the Yoga Maya comes and makes her feel, but then, that may be true, but who will cuddle me then? And Krishna's thinking, yes, who will cuddle me? And what kind of philosophy is that? So she embraces it, and the spiritual insight goes out the door, and Vatsala Rasa prevails. And the Aishvarya, of course, has its place, but it could never sway her Vatsalya. This is the beauty of all of the bhavas as they manifest all the rasas in Vrindavan. Outside, of course, of Vrindavan, this Aishvarya can have a role in greater power. Doesn't have much of a role in Vrindavan, but when it gets a place, a chance, it does something very extraordinary. So, for example, when Krishna went to Mathura, or when Krishna manifested in Mathura, his parents began offering prayers to him and so forth. They're about Saliraj receded to the background in the face of the Aishvarya Gyan. Here in the face of the Aishvarya Gyan, or anywhere in Vrindavan, it doesn't sway their Vatsalya. They reason about it in ways that they land on their feet always, and Krishna's just my son, Krishna's just my friend, Krishna's got problems and he needs help, and we're here, to deal with that and so forth. So there's some differences between, as I say, how this is played out in Chaitanya Bhagavad, and I think there's some relation between, I think Krishna is kind of telling the story a little differently here. There's no pots, but, or it may be a different Leela, but at any rate, it does correspond wholly with the Krishna Leela, of Krishna's eating dirt, and the same philosophical points are brought out. Again, the Krishna Leela brought out, if you look at it, this was Mahaprabhu's idea, let's not impose our intellect on the environment of the Leela. Let's just tell it as it is. And although it says things that are inconceivable, how these can be fully immanent and fully transcended at the same, by his mystic power, by his Achinta Shakti. God can do wonderful things. You think too much. And by thinking you can't arrive at such a place where such things are possible. So just read it as it is, was his idea. And this is the, again, the Achinta Veda tattva of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And Mother Yashoda here got it in the form of Sachi. And she's teaching me and says, why didn't you tell me that earlier? Saved me a lot of trouble. If we can learn about bhakti from earlier, we'll never go to this mind, which is completely impractical. And you can tell the Maya bodies like that. It's all one. Here's some dirt. One of my gavas told me it was in Rishikesh, not Rishikesh, Kumbh Mela, I think it was. I think it was Giriraj Maharaj many years ago. And I think it was him. And he was there and he had a blanket. It was cold, and he was arguing or discussing with a Mayavadi. It was going on and on and on. And after some time, he said, I can see that you're a little cold. And he said, actually, yeah, I'm a little cold. He said, well, I've only got one blanket, but anyway, here, I'll give you a thread, because the thread and the whole blanket are warm, so you should be just as warm as I am throughout the night, something like that. So it's a way of saying your philosophy is not practical, even in terms of spiritual pursuit. It does away with the self. It's a very unbecoming way of pursuing the unity, the oneness that is at the heart of reality, by way of doing away with any difference. It's questionable whether you've gone anywhere positive by doing that. Harmony is not just doing away with everybody else. Unity is not doing away with everybody else, but somehow everybody working together, something like this. So this is the philosophy here, coming out early in the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we can see that the Leelas are full of charm, and they have the capacity to give rise to that within ourselves. And at the same time, they're pregnant with philosophical insight that we can draw from that. That we can apply then in our pursuit and practice, pursuit of those ideals that we're attracted to. On the face, the Leelas are charming, we become attracted to them. This is their principal power. And so you don't know any philosophy that you like Krishna. And it's possible, theoretically, that's enough. If you're charmed by the Leelas enough to always chant his name and so forth. But mostly we find practically people need a little philosophy, because they have another influence in their life that they're charmed by as well, and it still has residual power from anadi karma for a long, long time. Habits learned, since forever are difficult to overcome. But bhakti is very powerful, so it has the power to turn the head and the heart in the direction of Krishna, and especially these Leelas of Krishna, human-like Leelas. They're just very powerful, very charming. They create a bond, give us an opportunity to bond emotionally with the Godhead. So that's the principal kind of purpose of the Leela. So in one sense, if you can just speak about it feelingly and present it so what people can be charmed by later, then secondarily, as I say, there are philosophical lessons to be learned from it. And that can help us to understand, although it's charming, it's a little bit further along than where you are right now in terms of entering into it and what it means to love Krishna like that. These other things have to be in place and so on and so forth. So there was a place for both, commenting on the Leelas from a philosophical point of view and just telling them, right? Question?
Just a comment and a question. When you said how the insight was, Lord Chaitanya said, why didn't you tell me this earlier? I almost could see I wouldn't have had to have been bothered with this Leela in Krishna Leela where I had to show you all of this Aishwarya and disrupt that. But I had a question. You very interestingly explained how the Aishwarya acted almost as in its own accord to facilitate Krishna's pastime. And I never thought of Aishwarya like that. I thought of the Yoga Maya, like covering and but here it's like bringing out Krishna's godliness. Although in other pastimes we see the Aishwarya Krishna calling upon it himself to kill the demons or like this. So two questions. Where do we find that? And have the Acharyas stated that so beautiful? And do you have anything further to say about that? The Aishwarya will act on its own like that.
Yeah, well, I think it's it's Yogamaya functioning in different ways. To cover him up, to uncover him for his different purposes. We have Madhurya Gyan and Aishwarya Gyan. Both are there. Both aspects, knowledge about both. And both are revealed by this Swarup Shakti. Yogamaya is another aspect of the Swarup Shakti. So, for revealing, for covering, I mean, the covering is also revealing in another way. But it's different than the Maya Shakti, which is deluding. She deludes in one way to make him do a way to hide his Aishwarya, and who hides the Aishwarya can recede and come out. But here they've been, as I've spoken about it, kind of personified. So you're kind of asking, I guess, well, if Purnamasi is Yoga Maya and she covers, and who's the?
Not really.
It's kind of the same function of the same Shakti, but yeah, you can find this kind of explanation.
I was just thinking more that the Aishwarya is a power of God. So you would think that he would draw it out himself. Of course, he is through the sort of Shakti.
Well, I think his powers are all personified. So, in a sense, so he has a desire, and his powers fulfill the desires themselves, and they have their roles in different places. It's not that Yoga Maya, for example, is not present in Vaikuntha, but functions slightly different. But Tulsi's there, and Vrinda Devi's there, and Vrindavan. So the powers, Shaktis. There's the powerful and there's the powers. So his powers personified in a way they answer to his desires, fulfill them. Like a shadow. Like a shadow follows you everywhere. Yogamaya is following Krishna and whatever he desires and making it work. Something like that. Anything else? Srimad Mahaprabhu ki jai, Chaitanya ki jai, Shri Sri Gaurada Madhava ki jai, Bhakti Vrinda ki jai, Bhut Premanam.
Tripurari Swami. Ki jai.